I'm your host, Lawrence Francis, welcoming you to the Winery Fingerprint series. Featuring producer conversations across wine regions worldwide, recorded in November 2025. In each series episode, I work with producers to discover their unique winery fingerprint. This has three essential components. One, it's factual, based in truth and therefore defensible, the solid foundations to build from. Two, it has personality and captures who you actually are and how you operate. And three, it drives an emotional response. It makes people care enough to pay attention, remember the details, and tell their friends. Tune in to each episode to hear what this model uncovers for each guest. A model so powerful that for 50 producers in the same region, it will uncover a unique fingerprint for all 50. Each conversation is a sample of the full process of discovery, documentation, and refinement I work through with my clients on the Winery Fingerprint program. Today's conversation features Joe Wiens of Lost Ranch Winery in Temecula, Southern California. He provides the ultimate test of the winery fingerprint, having recently appeared discussing Wiens Cellars. So, across his two projects, he's in the same region, Temecula, California. He is the same person, Joe Wiens, but they are very different wineries. So, is the winery fingerprint able to deliver something totally unique and differentiated for each? Listen on to find out what we came out with. But first, here's Joe explaining the origins of the name Lost Ranch Winery.
It really started with a trip that my wife and I took, basically driving through the Southwest U.S. and we're both big fans of Georgia O'Keeffe. She's an artist that we both admire. And so we toured her house in Abiquiu, New Mexico, and then toured her ranch, and it's called Ghost Ranch. And this was, probably 6-7 years ago. And just fell in love with the Ghost Ranch. And, at the time we're like, oh, that would be an amazing name for winery. And obviously we didn't want to do a full bite of Ghost Ranch. So we liked the idea of Lost Ranch, and then to kind of like further, the more we thought about it, we thought about this kind of idea of, this Southern California being so busy and everybody's moving around so quickly and just having a place for people to kind of get lost in time and they're not staring at their phones, they're just enjoying their time. And so kind of like a refuge or a place for people to kind of slow down. So we kind of like that angle. And then we also talked about, kind of the idea with our winemaking and that, we're not doing anything necessarily new, we're just bringing back some kind of older, pre-chemical era ways of making wine, where, it's, and farming. And so kind of the lost techniques of farming and making wine in maybe a more simplified way. Still very intentional, but just kind of, bringing it back to the basics.
I'm going to ask, how would that change though, person to person? You mean, how would you tell that differently?
I don't know if I have an answer to that. It's honestly, it's just whatever the first thing that pops into my mind. So it's not like an intentional tailoring of the message to a certain person. It's just a entirely random thought process.
So what I'm hearing then is basically that you give me the kind of the full director's cut, but then maybe depending on where you are, you might just nip a little bit of that out. You might just say, oh, that's the name of Georgia O'Keeffe's place and we love her and that's why, sort of thing. And maybe you don't go into that full element of all of the significance and the lost and the connections. And is that?
I would say probably the most compelling story to us, or at least the one that we probably say the most. And my wife is much more eloquent with this, but that idea of having a place where people can get kind of lost in time and lost in the moment and where this is a tagline that we saw, so we're not going to use it, but the idea of where fast lives slow down. So a place where, the hustle and bustle and you have a place where you can just kind of relax and get lost in the moment.
I really like that. What was that for? Out of interest, was that a hotel?
It was actually on that same trip. So there's a friend of ours that has a local olive oil business in Joshua Tree, and then she opened up a hotel in Santa Fe, which I'm blanking on the name, but it's a beautiful, beautiful kind of vintage vibe hotel, and in their lobby on the fireplace, it says that above the fireplace. We really dug that saying. So
yeah, that is amazing. So yeah, I mean, well, maybe just end this here and go and ask them if you can use that.
Yeah. We'll trade you a case of wine.
It's that good. Yeah, no, exactly. Okay, well, we won't cut any corners, So let's assume that's off limits. The second question then I asked you, Joe, was your winery origin story. So I guess here we're getting maybe closer, beyond the name, into a little bit more about the philosophy. But again, you've already answered that. So please give me that in whatever way makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, from my side, I grew up in the wine business. My mom was a restaurateur in Napa Valley. My dad was a farmer and grape grower in Lodi, and is a winemaker. He founded Wiens Cellars, and was a winemaker there for probably 10, 15 years. And then I took over for him, and the winemaking style at Wiens is, full-bodied reds and very kind of, I feel like we're almost chasing a Napa style wine. And it served the purpose very well. And there's nothing wrong with that. But, I met my wife, this is about 14 years ago. We got pretty into natural wine and just the idea of having wine that well-made natural wine, in my opinion, is as kind of close to the vineyard as you can get and as close to nature as you can get. If it's got crazy VA and it's got all kinds of flaws, then maybe it's not so close to the vineyard anymore. But we just, we fell in love with natural wine and maybe not full-bodied red wine isn't top of mind for us when we're having our meals at home. So the opportunity came up for us to acquire some land in Temecula that was previously a citrus grove for about 50-60 years, and it had been fallow for about 5 or 6 years, and then we planted 5 acres on that vineyard. The other big thing that has been a passion of mine is organic farming. I've always had organic gardens growing up. My wife and I are avid gardeners as well. So I tried to talk her into having one garden at Lost Ranch, but we still have 2 gardens. So we have our home garden and our Lost Ranch garden. But we really dig organic farming, and kind of the idea, on the farming side is that we're trying to have the lightest touch possible. Kind of the idea with organic farming or the idea of a certified organic vineyard. You can be certified organic and still put down a lot of pretty nasty organic chemicals, and really kind of interrupt the natural cycle of the land and the soil ecology. And so, we didn't want it to just be organic. We want it to be kind of stripped down to the basics. And then, if we have something that becomes out of balance, for example, too many gophers in a certain area, we might trap. Or if we have, if we have skeletonizers, which is it's an insect that a caterpillar that defoliates a vineyard pretty quickly, we might go in and spot spray with BT, which is a organic bacteria, but not just having this standard recipe where we're going through the vineyard 5 times a year with an organic insecticide and organic fungicide, and this is just the standard protocol, and this is what we always do, and laying down a bunch of copper and sulfur. That's not what we want. So that's kind of that on the farming side, and then kind of, segueing into the winemaking side is the similar kind of thought process and idea that we're taking that light approach with winemaking as well, and just really trying to only guide the ship when we feel like it needs to be guided.
Yeah.
Not making moves that aren't necessary.
Yeah, sure. Okay. And then, interestingly, or, just it is what it is. I asked you to rate your origin story and you gave that a 5. So what does a 5 origin story mean to you in that respect?
Well, I mean, I feel like we've got a cool story, but it's not, again, we haven't spent a lot of time, making it into something that's in my opinion, easily digestible for a consumer,
Mm-hmm.
I know you're into wine, and so you're probably into what I was saying, but I could very, very easily see, a fresh consumer's eyes glazing over at about 1 minute in on that long talk I did.
Got you. So again, back to that. Okay, what's the point? Literally the point and the point to kind of break through. No, I love it. Okay, so and then the final question, the third question I asked was, what makes your winery unique compared to any other? So putting it nice and broad there, and what do you say to that? I guess you may not be able to see what you answered in the first place if you're on your phone.
No. I think I talked about maybe it not necessarily being a super unique story in the world of wine. The fact that we're farming organically or sourcing organic fruit, and that we're making low intervention wine. But in our market, which to me is the most important, because we are, 95% direct to consumer here for most of the wineries in Temecula. The local market is what I consider the world of wine. That's our bread and butter. And I think what makes us different is the fact that we are focused on farming and we're focused on winemaking. There's a lot of wineries that offer a lot of really fun experiences for people, and I've got nothing bad to say about that. But winemaking and serious wine is maybe not on their top 5 list of priorities for their winery. They've got a lot of other cool things that are making them money and that they're doing really good at, and so more power to them. But coming from a winemaking and grape growing background, that's always been my passion, and so I feel like there's something compelling with that, and I think we've had some kind of proof of concept with that. Just in kind of getting out into, so we've really only hit the San Diego, the local, obviously Temecula restaurant, wine bar scene, and then dip down into San Diego a little bit. But, there's beautiful, really nice restaurants, Michelin restaurants that, in my experience in the past, wouldn't give a Temecula winery the time of day to even consider a place on their list. And we're having really good success with these places, and so I think there's a I don't know how big or small it is, but I feel like there is I don't even know if demand is the right word, but there is an interest in what we're doing.
Okay, very cool. And then once again, putting you on the spot, you rated that a 7.
Yeah, it's a little better. Yeah, I think that's probably a testament to the success that we're having at some of these nicer restaurants, and we go and pour, and very often they're interested in putting this on the menu, and so we're very grateful and humbled by that. But it's nice to see that there is some traction there.
Got you. Okay, no, that's all good. That's all super clear. So yeah, thanks for taking the time to do that and then to explain that. And I think again, what I'm finding is really valuable through this process. I'm refining, and you're the last one of my sort of intense set of interviews. So you're getting the most refined version of this. But one of the really, I think, important things to consider is not only just what I think and what I'm synthesizing, or indeed what you think, and you're speaking for your wife and the team there, of course. But it's also to really think about the customer. So they're the third part of this conversation. So I'd like to ask you to pick a type of customer, because I think actually, even there, as you've just said, you've spoken about people coming to the winery, or, people who are like wine geeks, and, people like me, and then people who are in the restaurants in San Diego. So let's prioritize. Let's say, okay, for next year, and maybe, even slightly longer term than that, who are the, if you could only choose one group to think about and to kind of appeal and to grow, what type of customer is that?
Well, that's a challenging one. So my gut tells me to focus on the bread and butter here in the Valley, the people that know my reputation. It's maybe a slightly older clientele, maybe less familiar with natural wine or organic farming. But they're the people that I know that are here, that are spending money. And then my ego tells me that I want to appeal to the people that aren't here yet. The people that I want to come to Temecula, that I know are into wine, that the people in LA and San Diego and Orange County that really dig and appreciate wine and have traveled to wine regions all over the world, or at least maybe all over California, and that have always kind of brushed Temecula off as a less serious wine region. That would be the clientele that I would love to reach at some point.
Okay. And just so that I'm clear, when you say the bread and butter, the people who are there, this is kind of almost thinking about people who are already traveling to Temecula. They're already maybe visited a bunch of times, and you want to get them. Is that what I understood?
Yeah, I would say the bread and butter is either people that have traveled here, or maybe even more so the people that live in this area. I mean, there's within probably 25-mile radius of where I'm sitting, there's probably 500,000 people, or more. So those are the people that if we're direct to consumer, are visiting once a week or once every other week, and that are spending money. So,
and does it matter whether they visit or whether you send the wine out to them?
Long term, the idea is that they would visit our tasting room, and obviously we're still building out the tasting room, but yeah.
Okay, so this is a message. Then it does have to kind of travel ahead of you almost a little bit. It's not going to be necessarily you telling people in the tasting room or promoting like right now the tasting experience. Maybe that's the first link, is actually just getting more people to know about you and to buy.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. No, that's super helpful. And again, presumably you again, it feels like, again, you already know a lot of these people, because you've been there that long, and you've been working in this industry. It's not like you've just come in from, shipbuilding or whatever. It's like, you've been in the wine industry, this. So let's talk about them. So you already know these people. Then, if they're the bread and butter, what do they want if and when they choose to order a case of wine from Los Ranch?
I would say that they they might be a portion of the current pool that's maybe a little more conscious of environmental factors, and thinking more about being kind to the earth, and thinking in that regard, and then maybe also thinking more about what they're consuming, consuming products that might be a little cleaner and not have as many additives. But by and large, they're anything from young families. There's quite a bit of young families here in Temecula. The school system is great, so it kind of attracts a lot of young families, and then a lot of all the way up to kind of retirees that are just having a good time on their every day's a weekend for them. So they're coming out to wine country on a Tuesday partying, and they're maybe on average, maybe less concerned about the environmental side, and more just concerned about having a nice, well-made glass or bottle of wine.
Sure. No, and that's all good. And then final question is, again, for those bread and butter type characters. And I know there's even within that there's multiple kinds of people, but let's kind of blend them together a bit. It's like, okay, they're there, you know where to find them. What would make it easier to attract and retain them?
That's a good question. I would say, exposure is the biggest thing. Is it the thing I hear on almost a daily basis is, where can I try your wine? Do you have a tasting room? And I'll send them, the places in town that carry our wine by the glass, and hope that they make it over there. But then we're also, in the meantime, as we're building out the tasting room, we're hosting a lot of events. We're doing, small dinners at the vineyard, and hosting or participating in a lot of local wine events to kind of try to get our name out and get the word out.
Okay. I love it. And all right, I'll go through and explain again the test of the winery fingerprint, which again I know we ran through before, but again it's always good to get on the same page. And again, I probably may describe it slightly differently from last time. So whenever I'm proposing a winery fingerprint, or I'm assessing where somebody is with their winery fingerprint or slogan, I always have a 3-part test. So the first part is that it should be factual. It's like, you don't want to be saying something and then someone asks you about it. I was like, oh, actually, no. It's like, it's got to be true. We're not making stuff up here, which of course you're not. And then on another side of the triangle is something around the personality. I think it's got to capture something of you, really. Because I guess you and your wife are very much the faces of the brand, and I'm guessing if and when and certainly at the start that you're going to be the people that we meet because of the winery. So I feel like there is that kind of personal element. And then I think on the third side, it's all about what do the customers respond? Do they have an emotional response when they receive that? When they hear those facts, when they get that personality projected them, when they feel kind of your and your wife's energy. It's like, do they care? Because that's of course ultimately what will make them want to take a step closer to you, which I think is a big part of that. So I've got two things have come up from what you've spoken about just there, and I think they cover different parts of the business. I feel like for the well, first off, I love the story. I think it's great. I think and also, and this is where we go as well. It's like, I like where fast lives slow down, but again, it's like that's theirs. It's like it feels like we don't have to take that. We can do better. We can do something better. And I think actually, so the first one, I think you've actually already. I think Lost Ranch is a brilliant name. I've got to say, I think it is such a good name, and I love the significance that you put on it. In that when I was asking you about the slogan at the start, this idea of, I love that, lost techniques. I've written, I don't know if you said this, but I've written this down. I got the idea of getting lost in the moment.
Yeah.
I really like that. I don't think that's necessarily a tagline, but I think it's almost like, I think those things, they talk about the production and maybe what they're really doing. They're giving more meaning to your name. I feel as if and maybe that's something that I felt you might have been struggling a little bit with, is giving it meaning, not necessarily giving it the explanation, but maybe even just that could be a quick way of explaining the name. It's like without, of course, if you're sitting down, you can explain about the Ghost Ranch and Georgie and the road trip and yada yada yada. But it's just like we're depending on who you're talking to, it's like, man, we're all about lost techniques. We're all about doing things in the way that they used to. Here, try this wine. That's the sort of thing you can say at a wine tasting, right? Where you've got literally 10 seconds with someone.
Yeah.
Hey, welcome to the Lost Ranch, guys. We're going to pour you this wine, which is all around lost techniques. And I feel like, again, that kind of, maybe that's a little bit more on the winemaking side, but that kind of, that idea of disconnection, that kind of, getting lost. I think you said getting lost, but I added on kind of getting lost in the moment. I feel like, man, that's a sense of that location, and again, I understand this is on the way. This isn't in the world right now, but I feel like that captures what it sounds like you're on the way to creating. But then something else came out, more to do with, again, if you like, your focus now, getting people to, I think you want people to buy without needing to come to the winery, right? Or even for that to be a thing. It's like somebody who's in San Diego could, you do some kind of outreach to them, or you've got you've got some way of reaching them, and they were like, "Hey, I love that. Let me order a case, and let's get a case out to them." And on that kind of side of things, I think that's even got to be sharper, And okay, I'll tell you what I've got for that. What I like. I really like this idea of conscious consumption.
Uh-huh.
And again, you'll kind of notice the trend here. You'll notice the themes. It's like I like that from, again, let's put it through the test. I think factually that what you've spoken about on both sides has been very much around being conscious, right? It's like actually being connected, being present. I think there's for me it's consciousness. It's like this shared consciousness, and about as woo as you want to make it.
Yeah.
All of those things. But again, I really like the kind of juxtaposition and the tension between consumption, because it's like, I think we're taught that, well, I mean, we're killing the earth and we're doing this and we're doing that. And it's like, it's just this mindless consumption that's kind of killing us. And I like that consumption also, it's closer to what you're doing, which is making wine, on one level. I know there's all the other elements around that, but on one level, people might just see you as, hey, that's the guy that makes banging wine. We've got to communicate with those people who don't want to visit, who don't want to, necessarily want to get lost in the moment. They just want to, or they see it on the list. And I like that. I like the idea. I feel like, again, maybe slightly more. Well, I think both really do actually tap into you. Again, I find you. I think it's clear, very thoughtful person. But again, it's like you're a realist. You're not like living off grid somewhere. You've got electricity. You've got some machinery, and you've got the things there. It's like there's consumption going on, but it's, I think, again, this idea of consumption per se is not bad, but it should be more conscious. It should be thought behind it. It should be intention behind it. And again, on the third side of that, I as a consumer, as somebody who values those things, as somebody who thinks about those things, as somebody who is kind of into that, even though I live in cities and around cities, again, I will think about where my food comes from. I'll think about, the backstory and where, not just looking at the thing on the plate and thinking about, okay, what goes around this, and almost getting into that, tapping into, I think, people who are, on the face of it, maybe 10 years ago, sustainability would have tempted them. But now everyone's saying sustainability. It's almost, it's like we can't say that. But I don't think you have to hide it. I think you just have to change the word. And I feel like conscious consumption is something that will vibe with that.
Yeah.
Also, that we're like, we're not living we're not hippies living in the in the middle of nowhere. We're not off grid. We're not perfect. But when we do consume, we're doing so consciously, and I think it's also a nice play just on the attitude to alcohol as well. My own, no one's buying your wines just because they want to get smashed, right? It's like they want to be thoughtful. They want to spend time with the wine. They want to see it evolve. They want to appreciate it, talk about it, and then just let it kind of do its thing in the room, or with the person, and just let it add its part and play its role within that scene, whatever's happening there, rather than let's just get completely hammered. It's like kind of been there, done that. For me, on all those three things, I really like that. I really like the idea of conscious consumption, and I think
I dig it. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we can move into the lost in the moment as we get built out and open the tasting room, and then in the meantime we've got lost techniques and conscious consumption to kind of play with. So
exactly. I feel like and just to say, obviously, this is something I'm giving to you, so, and you'll discuss this and you'll make it better, which I think is always the cool thing. I do like the conscious consumption. It is even a different looking word. Lost ranch is kind of short words, and then you've got this thing, conscious consumption, that's like two long words. It's like, it kind of makes it fit, and it almost jars a little bit even with the name. It's like, okay, we're all about conscious consumption, guys. It's like, have a glass and let me tell you about it, or it's like, it feels like there's something more meaningful there than just saying we're certified sustainable, which of course is everybody. It's like, I feel like it's table stakes now for a lot of people. They're like, oh yeah, like sustainable, the eyes glaze over, and pulls out it. You don't need to do that. You can,
and then if they're still interested for more, then I can go into my long-winded description of what that means for us.
That's it. That's it. Give the headline first.
Yeah.
And then, and give them whatever they ask for. See how they respond. I always like to ask, give that, and let's be brave. Let's give you the lost techniques, the lost in the moment. Let's say that's yours. That was what you kind of came with, and I just zoomed in on that. But what do you think about what I brought to the party in terms of conscious consumption? What would you sort of rate that as a starter concept, and a way to start to reach out and broaden out this idea, this ethos of what you're working on?
I'd rate it 10 out of 10. Yeah, I dig it. Like to me, it's just something concise enough to run with,
Yeah.
And that's, I feel like that's what we've been kind of missing, or what we've needed to spend more time with is just some bullet points, and then from those bullet points we can kind of, it's an easy segue to talk about more, but at least we can kind of hit the bullet points. So
That's it. Okay. And I like to kick the tires. So what am I missing? What's missing from that?
I will say something that I should have talked about more, and I'm sure my wife would appreciate it, is she's got a background in design, and she's incredibly artistic, and so from an aesthetic standpoint, I feel like we're going to have a pretty compelling space, and we already do with our modest little vintage trailer and vineyard and ranch with our sheep and chickens, but that kind of extra attention to the aesthetic side of things is going to be, I feel like, is going to really resonate.
Okay, and then final thing, when this is a kind of a, we'll see where we go. We'll see if this makes the final cut. Let's kind of see where we go here. I'm not sure exactly where we're going to go, but again, a huge thank you. I've got one of your wines here. It's not open because I've had another Oregon wine that's sort of on the go. Yeah, and when it comes, and this was one wine that I had when we met, and this was one wine that kind of really resonated with me and kind of stayed with me. And I'm just curious. Tell me again the story here, because I do remember that there was a lot behind this wine, and I remember that feeling, but I don't remember the exact detail of that. So I'd love you to just sort of share that again.
Yeah. So I'll start with the good news and bad news. The bad news is at 21 was the only vintage that we were able to work with this fruit. The good news is we still have a good amount of it left. We had, I think 8 or 9 barrels of it, and just released it, maybe 10 months ago. So, still, we're still holding on. The hope is to hold on to enough to have some for when we open the tasting room, because it is such a cool vineyard. And so basically, there's this town, Temecula is a Native American term, and the local tribe is the Luiseno tribe, and they have the Pechanga Reservation. So on the Pechanga Reservation, behind the gates, there was and still is some old vine mission that was planted over 100 years ago. And from my understanding, there was kind of a satellite mission on the reservation 100 years ago and more. And that's where the vines came from. So originally, I think from the San Luis Rey mission in Oceanside, the cuttings made their way over. But yeah, really cool variety. This was the first vinifera or wine grapes that came to the New World. And old vine vineyard, it's dry farmed, which is it's commonplace where you're at, but often we get maybe 10 to 12 inches of rain here. So for us to dry farm is a unique sight. So just really happy to work with the vineyard. The owners are really cool couple, Ernie and Norma. They built their own geodesic home in the 70s or 80s, and they've given me quite a bit of cuttings over the years. Every time I go and visit them, they give me more cuttings. So we've got quite a bit of that mission now planted at Lost Ranch that we're excited to work with. So yeah, and that's kind of the other cool thing about that wine, in particular, is I feel like it's tasting as good or better than it has since we bottled it. And there's kind of this conception that, because the wine has low SO2 and because it's unfiltered, and it doesn't have any preservatives or anything in it, that it's not going to age well. And I think this is a good testament to the opposite, that if it's, if the wine is balanced and in a happy place when it goes into bottle, it oftentimes will age out really beautifully. So
I love it. And I've got to ask, you brought it up. It was the bad news. How come you won't get to work with the fruit again?
So there's a very large winery in the valley who's got he's an amazing guy. He's got his and he's actually doing quite a bit of work with sustainable farming, which is, unfortunately not the norm here. So he's one of the good ones, but he's also got a program with autistic folks and teaching them, vineyard skills and winemaking stuff, and it from what I understand, the grapes and the wine go to that program now.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't have a really compelling reason to fight for it. He's a great guy. From what I understand, it's going to a great program. So I tell him every year though, hey, if you don't need it, let me know. So
that's it. And we're about to say there's only 8 barrels and there's not masses there. So
yeah,
maybe only big enough for one of you.
yeah.
The production. I like it, and thank you for giving me. And I think also I just wanted to as well, refresh my memory about the story, and of course share this with more people, because I think it's again, this is something that no one knows about Temecula. So I'm really looking forward to sharing these and spreading that story internationally now. But I also wanted to test that tagline, because I think that actually, it should. I think it should also work for the people that you're working with. If you're getting fruit in, and I kind of vaguely remembered the half the story. I think we were in the middle of a wine dinner when you told me, so
yeah.
got a little bit cloudy. But I feel like it fits even a wine that that you haven't grown yourself. It's like that's I feel like those stewards there, the ones who are looking after that vineyard, they're very conscious about how they're consuming that, right? They're very conscious about where those grapes are going. I feel like that's almost a philosophy that describes you, but then it also describes the people that you're interacting with, and maybe it's this sort of bigger mission that people can kind of no pun intended.
Yeah,
it's kind of this bigger mission that the people can be like, yeah, I'm down for that. I'm down for some conscious consumption. I don't know exactly what it means, but yeah, Lost Ranch, they're all about that.
We're trying to be good stewards of the land, and there's really nowhere better to look than the Native Americans that were here way before we came and started messing things up. So
a massive thanks to today's guest, Joe Wiens of Lost Ranch Winery. Reflecting on what we discovered together, and my final recommendation for their winery fingerprint, conscious consumption. So I really like the idea of conscious consumption for them, which I think is the stronger of the two ideas that I mentioned. This gives them a multi-layered winery fingerprint that gives them various directions to go in, tapping into the wider conversation about the use of resources. They show this in every aspect of their production by favoring dry farming on certified organic plots. This is a conscious decision for the planet, for their health, and the wines. I don't think we should try to disguise the fact that wine contains alcohol, and not every wine region or producer is set up to pivot into a low alcohol wine brand, as so many are trying to presently. Lost Ranch is in Southern California, so it will have wines with alcohol, but the style of winemaking doesn't focus on the alcohol. And rather than the tired, drink less but better message, they can focus on the idea of making each sip count. Truly conscious consumption. And having visited Temecula, I can see this messaging adding to the choice on offer for the region. attracting a different type of consumer, as well as surprising and delighting someone who thinks they already know everything that Temecula offers. This point of differentiation from other wineries also makes it easier for visitors to justify visiting just one more winery during their stay, which, when the region has already done the hard work of getting people to visit, is economic gold dust that helps lift up the region and other producers by offering additional diversity. Visit lostranchwinery.com, the link is below, where you can learn more and find their main social media handles. As discussed at the outset, I offer the Winery Fingerprint program to producers and regions, a process of discovery, documentation and refinement to find your unique winery fingerprint, as we've done today. If you work at a winery, a producer group or region, register for updates and be the first to hear about live events at interpretingwine.com/WF2026. And join me on the journey towards developing 10,000 wineries to discover their winery fingerprint. Next time on Interpreting Wine Winery Fingerprint Series in episode 597, I'll be speaking with Theresa Breuer of Weingut George Breuer in the Rheingau, Germany. Subscribe to be alerted when the episode goes live, and I'll see you then.